Hi there, this is Simon from Tokyo Productions and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. And this time we're going to be looking at creating this fiery planet scene. And as you can probably imagine, there's quite a bit of work involved in getting that effect, and it's going to take a while, but hopefully it'll be worth all the effort. So let's jump in and get started. I've got a new project here, and I've come to my project properties and I'm going to set it up to be 2048 wide by 2048 high, and I'll have a frame rate of 24 frames and a duration of 20 seconds. So I've got a square project, as you'll have gathered. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the library generators and add a clouds generator. So what we're doing here is we're building up a library of textures that we can use to create the planet, and then we're going to render them out and composite them in a separate project. Okay, let's come to the inspector for this clouds, and let's set the horizontal scale to 20 and the vertical scale to 20 and the speed down to 0 because we want it static. And let's set the method to turbulent. And now let's duplicate that, Command D, come to its properties, blend mode, and set that to screen. Next, let's come to the library, filters, and let's come down to distortion, and we're going to add the underwater filter. Let's come to its properties. I'm going to set the size to 0.5 and the speed to 0.2 and the refraction to 50. And I'll set the mix value to 30. Then we're going to duplicate this. Command D. And I'm going to set the speed down to 0. And then I'm going to duplicate that 3 more times. Command D, Command D, Command D. And I'm going to make some changes to each one of those. So the first copy, I'm going to set the size to 0.4, the refraction to 75. The next one, the size to 0.3, the refraction to 100. The next one, the size to 0.2, refraction to 125. And the next one, size to 0.15 and refraction to 150, just to create this much more interesting texture. If I turn those off, you can see how much more boring the raw clouds is. Turn that on, we've got a lot more fine detail in there. So next I'm going to take one of those, the second copy, the one without the animation, and I'll hold down the Alt key and drag it to my original clouds layer to make a copy. And let's do a bit of setup on this. I'm going to set the size back to 0.5. The refraction I'm going to set to 100. And here I'm just going to duplicate it twice. Command D, Command D. And I think I'll set the bottom mix, the lowest underwater, I'm going to set that mix value to 50. So what's all that going to look like when we're finished? Well, let's just quickly add a sphere filter to that top group just to see what's going on. And let's set the radius to 1000. And you can see that has created quite an interesting complex texture. Okay, so this is just for the purposes of demonstration. I'm going to delete that now, and I'm going to call this clouds medium, close it up and hide it. And I'm going to make a new group. I'm going to come to the library generators and I'm going to add another clouds. Let's come to the inspector and let's set the horizontal and vertical scale to 8 and the speed right down to 0.2. This time we'll leave the method at normal, and we're just going to make a change to the first layer strength, and we're going to set that to 0.75. And I think you can see that that's created a really nice dense texture of very, very fine detail. Okay, I'm going to call this Clouds Small and close that up and hide it again. And I'm going to make a new group, Command-Shift-N. Let's call this group Caustics. Come to the library, Generators, and unsurprisingly, I'm going to apply the Caustics generator to that group. I'll come to the inspector, so I want a much smaller size, 0.03. I want to reduce the speed to 0.2 and the refraction to 100. And I'll increase the brightness to 50. And now I've got that nice dense mesh. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add an image mask to this main caustics group, and I'm going to hit Command-Shift-M. Now we need a source for that image mask, so I'm going to come to the library, and again I'm going to add a clouds generator, and I will drag that clouds onto that image mask like so. I could also do that in the inspector if I wanted to drag that to the mask source well there. Let's first of all set up the image mask source channel to luminance. There we go. And let's come to the clouds generator and play with the controls again. So let's set the horizontal and vertical scale to 20, like so, and the speed to 0.2. Let's twirl open the gradient. We'll click on this white tab and we'll set its location to 40. And we'll set the method to turbulent. Now we've got a really interesting complex mask for those caustics. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come to the library, filters, and again we're going to apply from the distortion menu, we're going to apply the underwater filter, and we're going to apply it first of all to the clouds generator, which is the source for the mask, like so. Come to the inspector, we're going to set the size to 1, the speed to 0, and the refraction to 150, and you can see we've added even more complexity to that mask. Now let's hold down the Alt key and drag that underwater to that top group, making a copy of it. Let's come to the inspector. I'm just going to reduce the refraction to 75 and the mix value to 50. And then I'm going to duplicate it, Command D, and increase the refraction to 150. This is all in the interests of increasing the complexity of the texture. Okay, so I think we're pretty much finished. Let's close that up. What we're next going to do is we're going to render out each one of these textures. So Command E, we'll use ProRes LT, and we'll put them into a folder that we'll call Tutorial Textures, and we'll keep the names of the groups, so Clouds Medium, Clouds Small, and Caustics. Render those out, and we'll move on to the next stage of the project. First of all, though, we'll save this as Planet Textures if we want to come back to it. Okay, So let's move on. Okay, so I'm in a new project which I've made 1280 by 640 just to give it a little bit more of a cinematic look. It's 24 frames a second and the duration is 10 seconds. So I'm going to come to the file browser and the folder tutorial textures where I rendered out those textures. We're going to import those and we're going to change the order, move caustics to the top, and then we're going to select caustics and cloud small, come to the inspector, properties, set the blend mode to screen. And then we're going to come to the top of this group, library, filters, scroll down till we get to distortion, and we're going to add that sphere filter again. There we go. Come to the inspector, and as we said, we're going to make the radius 1000. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to add a camera. Alt Command C, switch to 3D, and that'll enable us to reframe the planet. Now, if I just come to the camera's Z position and move it back, you can see that that's made a mess of our sphere. And that's because the sphere is being applied to a 3D group. So in order to avoid that, let's make a new group, Command-Shift-N, put our planet group into it, and make our planet group not 3D. So turn it off. There's a toggle here, incidentally, for 3D. You can also use Control-D. And that means that our camera is operating as it should. So let's just zoom to a point where the planet is full frame. And then let's get to work on some of the compositing. First of all, I would like to clone the cloud's medium. So I'm going to hit K to make a clone of that. I'm going to set the blend mode to multiply, and I will rotate it through 60 degrees. And I think I might just reduce that to 50%. So then that's just giving me a bit more complexity. I'll also take the caustics small and clone that. So K, and I will rotate that also through 60 degrees. And then I'll clone the clone. So K again, and I'll set the blend mode of this new layer to add. Next, I just want to add a levels control to the caustics. So levels, color correction levels, and apply that to the caustics. Come to the inspector, and I'm going to just drag down the white just to give it a nice lot of, so somewhere around there, that's white value. Let's go for 0.75. So there we have it. So the other thing I want to do is adjust the speed of the caustics because I don't think they're dramatic enough. So I'm going to come to the properties, timing, and set the speeds to 175. And that's why it was good to have rendered out more of that texture than we needed. So now we've got enough. There we go, a little bit more dynamic. Next thing I want to do is I want to animate the effect of the planet rotating. And I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat in order to achieve that. I'm going to select that planet group, come to Filters, Distortion, and I'm going to use the Twirl filter, and I'm going to drag it down below that sphere. Come to the inspector, and I will set the amount to 0.75, the twirl degrees to 45 degrees, and then I'm going to open up the center and I'm going to right click on the Y value and I'm going to select Add Parameter Behavior Rate. And I'm going to type in a value of 0.01. And that will now just give me that nice appearance of rotation of the planet. So I'm pretty happy with that. Next, I'm going to add another color correction filter to that planet group. Let's put it at the bottom there. Come to the inspector, and this is where I want to colorize it. So first of all, let me just adjust the gamma, the overall RGB gamma, set that to 1.5, and then I'm going to hide these two twirl and sphere by using these show hide options here, just so we can get conveniently to the blue value. And I'm going to set a black in for the blue of 0.75, and that's colorized it for us. And let's now save that as planet build. We're going to come back to this project and add some more to it. And the next step is that we're going to build the corona of fire that goes around the edges. So first of all, we need to build a fire element. So we'll make a new project, and this one we will also make 720, 24 frames a second, and we will have 30 seconds because this is a pre-render. We want a nice lot of media. So first of all, we are going to come to the library, add a generators, and it's going to be clouds again. We'll add that. We'll come to the inspector, and now I want to set the height of this to be 1280, so it's square. Let's make a few changes. Let's set the horizontal scale to 10 and the vertical scale to 40, and the speed will increase to 0.8. Let's do our same trick with the gradient by clicking on the middle and setting that to 90. Again, punching up the blacks, isolating the whites. We'll leave the method at normal, and let's play again with our layer strengths. First layer 0.5, second layer 0.75, third layer 1, and the fourth layer 0.5. Now what we also want to do is to get those clouds to move upwards like they were flames. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to come to the Y offset, and we're going to right click, add parameter behavior, and we're going to select rate. The rate value is going to be 0.3. And now if we play that, we can see we've got the clouds streaming upwards. The next step is to add a few effects. I'm going to add a twirl filter. So filters, distortion, twirl, and I'm going to add that to the clouds. Come to the inspector, and I'm going to set the amount to 0.25 and the twirl value to 0.25 and the mix to 75%. And I'm going to show the overlays, and I'm going to just move this down to about there. Right, I'm going to call that twirl left, and I'm going to duplicate it. I want it to be more or less in the center, so bring it over here. And what have we got? We've got 0.25. Let's set the twirl here to just 15. So twirl C. And then we'll duplicate it again. Twirl R. It's going to be on the right. So let's move that over to about here. And I want to set the twirl to 20%. So that's good. Let's turn off the overlays. And we want to add one more filter to this level. So I'm going to come to the distortion again and apply underwater. In the inspector, I'm going to set the size to 1, the speed to 0.2, and the refraction to 75. Next, we want to add a mask to this operation. So let's come down to the rectangle mask and let's draw something roughly like that. Let's zoom in, Shift Z. Let's show the overlays, Command /. Let's tab through till we get to Edit Points. Let's hold down the Alt key and then click along the top, roughly like this. Doesn't really matter how many points you have exactly. And then let's make a sort of a bit of a sawtooth, like so. Let's drag around all those points and set the interpolation to smooth. Let's zoom out a bit. I think I want to drag those points well down. And then I want to add a behavior. So come to Behaviors, Shape, Wriggle Shape. I want to set the wriggle shape to points and tangents. The frequency, let's go down to 0.5. And let's have 0 noisiness to keep it nice and smooth. And see how that looks. It looks like we need to edit our shape a little bit. So show the overlays. Let's go to the transform mode. Bring that in a bit. Bring that down a bit. Okay, obviously much too sharp. So the way we're going to sort that out is we're going to come to Filters, Blur, and we're going to add a Gaussian blur to the mask. This is a useful trick actually, because you can obviously feather the mask, but you can only feather it uniformly in all directions, whereas if you use a filter, blur filter, you can feather the horizontal and vertical separately, which is what we want to do in this case. So I'm going to turn the horizontal down to about 2, and then I'm going to set the amount to, let's say, 300. Yeah, that'll do. And you can see that I've got relatively sharp sides, which is what I want, but I've got a nice soft upper edge. We need to turn on the overlays again and shrink that back down again because the blur has increased the height. Okay, and we want to do one more thing, which is to add a twirl filter to the enclosing group. So come to distortion again, select twirl, apply it to the group, come to the inspector, amount to 0.25, and let's set the twirl itself to 0. Let's move the center down to there. Let's right click on the twirl value, add parameter oscillate, and let's set the amplitude to 15, and that'll swirl the whole thing quite nicely. Okay, so that's another element done, and we can render that out. Command E, ProRes LT again, and let's put it into our tutorial textures and call it fire element, and render that out. Okay, so next we're going to take that fire element that we've just built and turn it into that complete corona. So first of all, well, let's set up our project. Again, we're going to go for 2048 by 2048, 24 frames a second, and let's have a duration of 20 seconds again. Come to our file browser, let's grab that fire element and bring it in. Let's zoom out. The first thing we need to do is to reset the anchor point of that fire element so it sits at the bottom of the element rather than in the center. So let's switch to the anchor point tool and then just drag down till that sits on the bottom, and switch back to our transform tool. Next, we need to make a replicator. So I'm going to hit L, and that makes a replicator. Let's first of all set the properties of this group to screen before we forget, and then come back to the replicator itself. We'll set the shape to circle and the arrangement to outline, and then we'll turn on align angle, and we'll also turn on additive blend. Let's move the replicator itself to the center of the screen by hitting the reset button. Come back to its properties. Now we want to set the radius, in this case, to 600, and we'll have 15 points. Let's also set angle randomness of 15. I know this is looking like a rather strange mosaic at this point, but it will come together very shortly. And that's because we need to set this scale down to 25. What we also need to do is, because all those are pointing inwards, we need to set the angle to 180. You'll probably notice that all the cells are using the same start frame. And we can change that by coming down to source frame offset, and we'll type in a value of 12, and now they're all distinct, which is far better. What we also want to do is add a little bit of movement to the individual cells. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to the scale randomness, right click on the Y scale randomness, and we're going to add parameter behavior, oscillate. We'll set the amplitude to 25 and the speed to 8. And that means that, let me just set my render preview to resolution to 1/4, so it'll keep up. There's a bit more differentiation. Okay, so that's our first replicator element, and I'm going to call this one main fire. And then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to hide the original main fire by clicking here, hidden, and I'm going to close it up like that. The second is going to be called flares. So let's make a few changes to this replicator. We'll set the number of points to 7. On the scale randomness, I want to set an X scale random value of 10, just so they're a little bit different again. Right, so then what we need to do is to come to the oscillate behavior here for that fire element. I'm going to change the amplitude from 25 to 125, and I'm going to set the speed to 12. So now if we play that, we can see we're getting these surges of fire. Right, in order to make that a little bit more interesting, what we're going to do is we're going to come to the filters, distortion, and we're going to drag out twirl again, and we're going to add it to that flares group. And what we need to do with that is set the amount to 0.13 and the twirl to minus 45 degrees. Turn on the overlays, Command /, and I'm going to drag that center to the base of that flare there. I'm also going to set the mix value to 75. And if I turn off the overlays, and we'll watch that, you can see that it's doing nice things to that flame as it shoots up. So let's just turn on the overlays again, Command /, duplicate the twirl, Command D, and bring it over to here. So that's the other one that's doing dramatic shooting up. And again, that just adds extra value to that. Okay, obviously in this particular instance, we're only really interested in what's happening to these two. We can leave the others behind because they'll be more or less hidden under the existing fire. While we're at it, let's save this project and let's call it replicator build. And we need to make one more replicator. Let's close up that flares. Let's turn it off. Let's take that main fire, Command D to duplicate it. I'm going to drag that to the top, and I'm going to call this small fire, because I want a ring that's just going to fill in with little smaller flames, fill in all the gaps. Let's come to the replicator properties. Set the number of points to 30, but what we'll do is we'll come to the scale and bring that down to 15. There we go. We'll come to the oscillate behavior. In this instance, we really don't want too much of it. We'll set the amplitude right down to 2, but maybe increase the speed to 9, so we've got a different speed to the rest of the fire. And what that's going to do is going to fill in any small gaps. So there you go. That was a pretty quick way of achieving that effect. It's a lot quicker than manually positioning multiple instances of the fire element, as you can imagine. Okay, so now we need to render this out. Main fire, flares and small fire. So that's Command E, ProRes LT again, and render it out to the textures folder with the appropriate name. And then we'll start compositing it with the planet. And I think, to be realistic, we probably need to save that for part 2 of this extremely long tutorial. I'm sorry about that, but believe me, the attention to detail does pay off in the long run. So hope you can join me for the next part. Thanks very much for watching.